Thank you so much for being here. If you like my work, please consider my book, She Is One, available on Amazon. Also check out my Patreon offerings, where I'm creating much more. Blessings and love to you.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah Sophia. Thank you so much for making it to the month of April with me on Patreon, and welcome to new subscribers. This is going to be an audio about the Me Too movement, hashtag #MeToo, which is basically the movement of people coming out and revealing their stories of sexual abuse and assault, typically on the survivor side of things, that people have been assaulted or sexually harassed or abused, and are coming forward and sharing their testimonies of what has happened to them and breaking the silence and shame around this topic. This is something that I've personally been working on my entire life. I actually feel like I was waiting for this watershed Me Too moment to happen. My entire life I've been working on freeing the shame around sexual abuse and helping people to break their personal silence and tell their stories. So if that means, you're assaulted and you have to stand up against your abuser in court, or if that means you're in a domestic abuse situation and you need to find your voice and your power in order to speak out and become free from that relationship and set the necessary boundaries to move forward, I've been kind of in the trenches with that, helping many, many people do exactly that. Actually coaching people who are going to go up on and give their testimonies in court, working with people in their relationships, many, many versions of this story, or even just people who've become very ill from not telling their story and having that stagnate inside of them and having their life force essentially held hostage by not being able to stand fully in the truth of what has happened to them and speak to that truth, because there's been this huge veil of shame around it, and there's actually been a lot of danger and threats around speaking the truth. So if we come out and tell the truth, it feels very, very dangerous, and oftentimes it actually has been very dangerous. The Me Too movement was, at least in part, sparked by the revelation that Harvey Weinstein was a major sexual predator in Hollywood and stands accused of raping many, many, many women, which I fully believe, and I think Rose McGowan was a huge player in that. Apparently there was an older version of the Me Too movement too, started a while before that, but then it took off on social media and everybody started telling their stories and saying hashtag Me Too, this happened to me, I was sexually assaulted, abused, raped, etc., etc. And I actually was really excited when that happened. It felt like almost surreal to me, because my entire life, as I said, I've been working on breaking the shame around sexual abuse for the reclaiming of personal power. This is central to my own story. I was sexually abused in my childhood from 11 on by a sociopathic man who was my brother-in-law. And this went on for many years, and then it went on again with a second brother-in-law. My other sister's husband did the same thing, and then following that, there was a whole slew of, narcissistic abuser types in my life, because that's what I was attracting to myself, because that's all I knew. So, and there was all this shame around it in my family. There was silencing, and there was denial, and there was punitive, threats, and I was not validated in my story at all. There was never any legal prosecution of this person who did this to me initially at 11. And he still has not been prosecuted, and my family did not support me in the process of, speaking my truth. And they still don't to this day. So I have a lot of experience and personal stake in this Me Too movement. So when this happened, I remember crying tears of joy and thinking this was the most wonderful thing, that people are finally standing in their truths and able to say those things, those words that they've been choking on their whole lives, these stories that actually hold power over us unless until we can actually tell them and reclaim that which is within them, to sort of make the unconscious conscious and break the silence and break the secrecy around this taboo subject. So I thought that it was phenomenal when all these people started hashtag, Me Too, telling their stories. And it was a beautiful moment. And I still think it's a really important moment in our history. What I've noticed is that the Me Too movement, in quotes, since it became a movement, anything that becomes a movement starts to get, for me, a little dicey. And the minute I notice it becomes a movement, I go, okay, now what's going to happen here? What kind of power plays are going to take place? So what I've noticed is that the Me Too movement has been used in various ways by various types of parties. And to me, it feels like there has been a real way that this has been used to place blame and actually to claim a certain type of victim status at times, not always. I completely validate and stand in the right for any person to tell their story in full and be heard. So that is not, to me, anything to do with victimhood. That is just the truth, just the ability to speak the truth. What does feel like it goes errant to me, and one of the reasons that I actually stepped back and away from the internet for a while, was that, first of all, I noticed that women were angry. Some women were angry at men for telling their Me Too story, and were telling men, you don't have the right to tell a Me Too story. You're the predator, you're the perpetrator, and I'm the victim, and you don't have the right. Like, you have to shut up and listen to women now, because we've been unheard, whereas men have been heard because men are privileged and women are not privileged. So there's whole rhetoric around that. And it hurts my heart when I hear that, because I happen to know a lot of men who have been sexually abused and assaulted, ritually abused, like sold into prostitution. I know some really extreme horror stories. And my own father is an incest survivor. His own father raped him as a child and basically destroyed his life and all his siblings' lives in the same manner. So I am really sensitive to the fact that men have a need to tell this story also. And I don't understand what happened that, someone thought that because they had a Me Too story, that they had the right to tell somebody else that they don't have a Me Too story. So the part that feels like it went really wrong to me was that, all of a sudden I have a story to share that's vulnerable, and I'm hashtag Me Too, sharing this story, and people are responding and seeing it. Okay, that's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. But then, do I have the right to tell somebody else that they don't have a Me Too story, regardless of whether they happen to identify as male or female, regardless of whether they look like I look, they're the same color as me, something like that, anything like that? Do I have the right to then tell them that their Me Too story is not valid and my story is? And that, to me, was a huge issue, because the silencing of other people's stories is exactly the problem that has allowed sexual predation and abuse to go on for all this time. So it's really just a repetition and a reinsertion of the same old dynamic when we tell other people, you can't tell your Me Too story, only I can, because you're male and I'm female. So that was one of the first red flags to me, that this was being co-opted in ways that I didn't feel comfortable with. The next thing I saw was that it got turned into a political football. And in particular, I think the left wing picked it up and said, we're going to use this as a way to attack the right wing and to say that, Donald Trump is a misogynist pig, which he probably is. But on the other side of the equation, there's a lot of people in the left wing, in left-wing politics, who have abused, like Anthony Weiner, who is very, very close to Hillary Clinton, like Harvey Weinstein, who was a primary donor to the Democratic Party. So there was all these ways that I saw this turn into a political football, and I thought, oh my God, you're kidding me. They're going to take people's individual stories and our true pain, which speaks to this huge collective issue, and turn it into a political football to make, the right this evil scapegoat, and to make the left the, quote, victim that has the right to, stand and basically on a soapbox and pontificate about how bad Donald Trump is. And I was like, this doesn't feel like personal ownership to me of the problem at hand. It doesn't feel like personal investment in healing. It feels like more reasons that I can feel right and superior and make somebody else wrong. And I would have felt the exact same way if it happened in the other direction. If the right was accusing the left or had turned it into a political football on the other side, I would have felt the same. I don't identify with either political party at all. And I feel like the schism creates an opportunity for yet more blame, yet more abnegation of one's own personal responsibility, and yet more confusion and opportunity for like artificial victimhood to propagate, which again is all connected to the same exact mechanisms that were in place initially that allowed all the sexual predation to occur. So it's yet more repetition of the same conditions of the problem, not transcending the problem. Lastly, thank you for letting me vent on this topic, by the way, because this has been on my mind and heart, and I haven't spoken to it publicly because I know that it's charged and it's just a lot. So if you're still listening, I thank you for that. Another thing I saw online was these witch hunts were starting to crop up of, women, typically women blaming men. It could go perhaps the other way around, but typically it's women, having like feminist in quotes, rants against a man, like someone on my Facebook, friends list posted that she had been abused by a relatively famous man in their partnership, like a domestic partnership, and that he had rage issues and that he was like unfaithful to her and all these things. So she was basically trying to bring him down in so doing, because she's like, he has a huge following and people should really know that he is this type of person and he has horrible rage and, he mistreated me. And so she used the metoo hashtag and used this as a means to tell her story, which I was totally fine with, because if that's the truth and that's what happened to you and you need to tell your story to get free, then I think it's wonderful. But again, this went to me really, really scary and almost ugly and creepy when people started then demanding that everyone unfollow him. So I was offline when this happened. This was during my Facebook hiatus of about 3 weeks. And so I missed a lot of the drama. But because she was on my friends list, several of my other friends on my friends list demanded that I unfollow this person, and I and everyone else who had been following him, right, who was in the quote community, that we were all supposed to unfollow him in solidarity with our quote sister who was telling the story. Now, while I believe her story and her testimony, first of all, I didn't even see this message, so I didn't have an opportunity to like really respond to it because I was on hiatus from Facebook. Secondly, when people start publicly tagging me and then saying they're going to unfriend me if I don't unfollow this other person, who I don't know, and I don't actually know the other girl on my friends list very well either, the other woman, like I don't know either party super well, so I really don't know their stories intimately, although I don't doubt her telling the truth. I don't actually know either of them, so I kind of was like wanting to remain out of the drama. But because I didn't unfollow this person on Facebook, because I didn't push the unfollow button, by the way, I wasn't on Facebook for that 3 weeks, there's no way I even could have, people had like formed a sort of like gang or a mob, and they all unfriended me. So like a dozen of these women who had come together in quote solidarity unfriended me because I did not unfriend or unfollow. It was like a public page. I wasn't personally friends with this guy, but I had followed his page. And because I hadn't unfollowed him, they all unfriended me. And again, all this drama is taking place on Facebook. I'm not even on Facebook. I'm writing a book and doing stuff for Patreon miles away, working on my own work. And I come back to find out that I had been basically held emotionally hostage, or people had tried to do that, basically, emotionally blackmailing me into unfollowing this guy. And because I didn't do it, they all decided to punish me by unfollowing me or unfriending me. And I was like, bye-bye, like have fun with that, because that's exactly the type of like bizarre Facebook drama that I feel has hijacked the Me Too movement in part, and it's exactly the reason that I am not on Facebook anymore, because I will not be a party to that. I will not be held emotionally hostage. I will not play weird Facebook games. I will not make demands of my friends that they unfriend or unfollow someone else ever, nor will I respond to demands of that nature, because I think it's extremely sketchy, and it does have this kind of like weird mob mentality, like witch hunt identity to it. So this is all being done under the name of, quote, feminism, and all being done under the rubric of the Me Too movement. And I noticed that there is not a lot of personal responsibility or personal sovereignty or centering involved. If you have enough time to be like going through my Facebook follow list to see if I followed a certain person and then try to hold me emotionally hostage as some like third or fourth party, when neither of us actually know the people in question, then you are off your own center in a big way. And so that's where I think this Me Too thing like brings me to my core point, which is that I feel like that movement can only hold water and only hold hope for the future and only move us into a better place if it involves deep personal responsibility for our own healing process, and only our own healing process, because only we can do the work for ourselves and we cannot do it for anyone else. And that is where the key comes in to me. So this brings me back around to my own story that, you know, I had early abuse. I was abused when I was 11 years old. I could have taken that victim card and run with it for the rest of my life. I could have decided that I was going to be, you know, disabled just like my mom is disabled. You know, I could have went and gotten any number of diagnoses from mental health providers. I could have, you know, went and found any number of excuses to not be well, and they would all be valid. I could have, you know, spend the rest of my life blaming this man who did this to me and using that as an excuse to not have to be anything myself or not have to stand in my own power. But that wasn't the full truth. And I would not let, again, anything hold me emotionally hostage in that way or spiritually hostage. It was incumbent upon me to take responsibility for all that I am. So if this man, you know, instilled me with a certain type of disease and trauma at age 11, which he certainly did for many years of my life, it was my job to move out of the vibration of blame and out of the vibration of hatred, out of the vibration of vengeance and gotcha, and I'm going to bring you down and I'm going to make you wrong because I'm the victim and you're the perpetrator. It was for me to move out of the victim vibration altogether and to take total charge of my own healing and to say what still lives in me, if anything, that contributes to the problem of sexual abuse, predation, silencing, shaming. What still lives in me that is still resonating at that vibration, at that wavelength? And how do I heal that within myself so that I am no longer a vibrational match on any level with either the identity of victim or the identity of perpetrator? And I tell a lot about that story in my book, She Is One, where I talk about how there were elements of myself that I had to change. And I could have sat in the victim thing forever and it would have been accurate and true. And I could have said, you know, that I'm this way because this man made me this way. Or I could have just denied that I had any changing to do at all. But there were things that I had to do. There were parts of me that were still a vibrational match to abuse. There were parts of myself that actually liked abuse. There were parts of myself that were deeply implicated in that cycle. And although I was not actively perpetrating it on anyone else, I was still perpetrating it on myself because it was still alive inside of me. So that was the work that I had to do. So basically, there is Me Too, which is this happened to me. And that's beautiful to stand in the first person and tell your story and be heard. It's beautiful and it's needed, but it's a first step. And the second step is I am responsible. Hashtag I am responsible. I am responsible now for who I have become as a result of all that has happened to me. And I am responsible for who I am at this moment today. And I'm responsible for all the ways that I may still carry imprints of this abusive paradigm, and that I may unconsciously perpetrate and or propagate it either on myself or on another, unless and until I recognize those things in the most honest way imaginable and devote and return myself fully to the divine. And that is a very painful and complicated and difficult operation. It's like the ultimate initiation into power, but it is also a far better alternative than remaining in this blaming, shaming, victimhood, false division, pointing of fingers, witch hunting of others, seeking revenge against others, trying to bring others down, schisming into left versus right type politics, excluding men because you feel like men don't have the right to speak because you're a woman who's been hurt. It's far superior, in my opinion, in my perspective, to do the hard work of standing in personal responsibility, hashtag I am responsible, and doing that work is the culmination of the Me Too. It is the reason why we speak and the reason why we have told our stories, so that we stand in the center of who we are, bring this all back home, and no longer need to dwell within that same paradigm, rather than using Me Too as a way to propagate the same old abuse, the same old revenge, the same old tit for tat, the same old silencing, the same old shaming. We use it to transcend ourselves, to transcend this paradigm, and to create something beautiful upon the earth. So that's kind of like my take on Me Too. And yeah, I feel really passionately about this. I may have to do a little bit of writing on it as well. But if you want to hear any more and you haven't already read my book, She Is One, it certainly talks about it. And my new book Hannah and I wrote together addresses this also from a very practical standpoint. So thank you for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts on this perhaps controversial topic. And I'm wishing you all the love. Thank you.